fought back, they were going to embarrass him. They were going to submit those videos to the public using the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. That's why Robert Kraft was silent. His attorneys needed time to draft a motion to suppress that evidence, keep it private, or risk embarrassment that it would be released. So, how did the federal government respond? Well, they offered a plea deal. And it was phrased, again by the authorities, as a dismissal of the charges. Well, there we go, right? Robert Kraft would be stupid not to take a deal where the charges were dropped, right? Well, wait, not so fast. These offers always have fine print. What was the fine print here? Robert Kraft and the couple of dozen or so other defendants that were offered the same deal would have to do some cursory punishment, including awareness classes, etc., pay a fine. But what was the poison pill? What's killing the deal, at least for now? They would also have to admit that they would be found guilty at trial. Boom. The battle on Kraft's public image continues. Now, there is sound legal reasoning for this condition. Apparently, many other defendants, because there were 200 original defendants, and about 24 got offered this deal, so a bunch of them were not offered the deal. As a former prosecutor, I'm guessing that the other defendants had priors or they didn't meet certain criteria. Diversion programs, they often have strict criteria attached to them. But as a purely legal strategy, the prosecutors know that if Kraft and the other defendants have to admit that they would have been found guilty, the non-diversion defendants would have to consider what their chances are moving forward. It would strike a blow to those defendants because similarly situated people had said they would be guilty. It makes sense from a legal perspective, but that's not why the government did it. The real reason they want Kraft to admit his wrongdoing is to get their pound of flesh. The prosecutor or the councilman or whoever has the most to politically gain here, or in the court of public opinion, knows that if they can land the whale that is Robert Kraft in the court of public opinion, that is political capital you cannot buy. So, where does that leave us? Well, in a fight about your public image, the one with the biggest gun is the person themselves. The only question is, will Robert Kraft shoot the prosecutor, or will he shoot himself in the foot? Well, Robert Kraft released a statement in which he did the textbook thing in these situations. Apologize, but don't admit. And when you try to do that, quite frankly, you're going to be ineffective at both. You're going to put something out there that probably leads towards people believing that you're guilty. And your apology is going to be phrased in a way that makes it not absolute and makes it look insincere. Well, here's Robert Kraft's statement in full. I am truly sorry. I know I have hurt and disappointed my family, my close friends, my coworkers, our fans, and many others who rightfully hold me to a higher standard. Throughout my life, I have always tried to do the right thing. The last thing I would ever want to do is disrespect another human being. I have extraordinary respect for women. My morals and my soul were shaped by the most wonderful woman, the love of my life, who I was blessed to have as my partner for 50 years. Kraft continues, as I move forward, I hope to continue to use the platform with which I have been blessed to help others and try to make a difference. I expect to be judged, and not by my words, but by my actions. And through those actions, I hope to regain your confidence and respect. Okay, let's look at this solely as an attempt to save your public image, which it was. And let's look at what Robert Kraft did in this apology. First, Robert Kraft says he's truly sorry. And then he holds himself out as someone who is superior to others morally. Wait, you didn't hear that? Well, first, why does he say truly sorry? To make sure we know he's not faking it? He has to make sure we know it's a true apology. I hate that. I hate that. Don't embellish. Don't blame others. Just apologize. People do this all the time. They say, oh, well, if you're offended, I'm sorry. Or, I'm really sorry. Just say you're sorry. Move on. No other words needed. But what about his superiority? It's dripping from the words, rightfully hold me to a higher standard, as if being rich and owning an NFL team creates a pedestal from which you now sit. No, we have no idea whether you should be held to a higher moral standard, Bob, but thanks for telling us that you should be. It's pompous, it's arrogant, and it shouldn't have been included. He could easily have just said he was sorry for disappointing the world and failed to hold himself to the standards he set for himself. Apologize for the standards you set for yourself, Bob. Don't try to be superior to others. There's no need to bloat your moral resume, Bob. So, I didn't like that. What did he do next? He found an excuse, even if it's his dead wife. That's right. He said his morals were shaped by the late Maura Kraft. By referencing her, Robert Kraft is using her passing as an excuse for his actions. That is disgusting. First of all, what happened here is that Bob Kraft paid for a sexual favor. It happens all the time, across the world, and in many parts of the world isn't even illegal. And I will bet dollars to donuts that Bob Kraft didn't start his rub and tug practice after his wife passed. It's absolutely absurd for Kraft to reference his wife in his apology, and it's disgusting. And it's just designed to draw away from the actions he did. Let's go back to why I hate these apologies without admittance. He's trying to say he didn't do it, or he's trying to justify that he may have done it, and apologize at the same time. It's really hard to do, and it comes off as disingenuous. And finally, Bob's apology had the call for redemption. We're going to judge him by his actions. He hopes to earn our respect. Listen, Bob, none of us care if you paid for a little action. It's the fact that you got caught, and now you're trying to save your public image. And you're trying to curry favor with the NFL, because we all know the NFL's watching here. And again, we don't care about that either. You do, Bob. You don't want to be suspended by the NFL. You don't want to be fined. You want to be seen as the clean-cut owner of the best franchise in sports history. Well, you know what? Don't pay for prostitution and don't get caught. So it's not confidence and respect that Bob Kraft is looking for here. It's the public's adoration. And truthfully, after a few news cycles and a couple of games of a suspension and a fine, no one's going to remember or care about what happened with Bob Kraft in Jupiter, Florida. In the end, Kraft's apology probably did what it was supposed to do. It probably gave the NFL enough to give him a mild suspension after he accepts a plea agreement, probably for diversion. I doubt he'll admit any real guilt publicly, at least now. My guess is that the settlement gets sealed, and then a year later it'll get expunged. And once it's expunged after a year or so, no one's going to care what the details are, whether he truthfully admitted anything wrong. My whole problem with this back and forth with Robert Kraft and the federal government is that it's become about the public image for both of them, and not the human trafficking case that we heard about from the start. Now, I hope that the case is just developing slowly. That's common. It's a federal investigation. Lots to do here. But at the same time, all this back and forth in the public over something as trivial as Bob Kraft's public image, notwithstanding potential connection to human trafficking, it's all detrimental to the victims of human trafficking that may be in play here, and to the entire discussion of human trafficking that is really important and is really causing a whole lot of pain and a whole lot of tragedy, not only in our country, but worldwide. Okay, let's move on from paying for sexual favors to paying for an education, but not in the way we're all used to. A lot of us have paid for our college education, and we still have the student loans to bear that out. But that's not the paying for education that we're talking about now. No, the FBI continues to dance with the NCAA and with colleges in general. And this time, it's about well-to-do, famous parents paying for their kids to get into universities. Now, the biggest name associated with this is Lori Loughlin. She was Aunt Becky on Full House, and she allegedly paid a tutor or a middleman, or however you want to refer to him, to get her daughter into USC, in part by claiming that she was on a crew team or a rowing team, when in reality she was not. And there are similar situations. Dozens of kids of wealthy parents went to this middleman who facilitated their admittance into many colleges, often through the sports programs, some of which didn't even exist in terms of at the high school level. So there were forged documents, there was bribery, and there's a big problem here. If schools are not playing on a level playing field, if rich parents can skirt the system to the detriment of qualified young men and women, then the NCAA and these schools have a real problem. And this is dovetailed off of the Adidas scandal that unfolded in college basketball, where players were getting paid to go to different universities. That's the scandal that cost Rick Pitino his job. Now Sean Miller of Arizona seems to be on the hot seat. Mark Gottfried, formerly of North Carolina State. These are big-name coaches who allegedly, or in reality, were giving money through a middleman, again, the middleman, to these students and to families of students to get them to come to their schools. And look, this is not over yet. The FBI is still investigating. And the way this thing works is, as they get people, as they arrest them, try them, and convict them, they get people to roll over. They get defendants, they get criminals to turn on other criminals. Think about Lori Loughlin and her rich friends. Do you think she's going to do a second of time in prison or in jail? No. No, she's going to give all the details she can, and that'll get them to the middleman, and the middleman will flip, and that'll get them to school administrators or maybe boosters who are giving lots of money, and the FBI will continue to dig. And on the sports side, Sean Miller has been subpoenaed. He's going to tell them what he knows. There's a lot to do here still. And what's becoming pretty obvious to me is that the NCAA system, both in academic acceptance and in sports scholarship, has to change. And in part I blame the NCAA, but in part you can't. How is the NCAA supposed to monitor every school, every rich booster, etc.? People with money and power are going to exploit the system. That's just the way life works. And in our world, we have law enforcement to enforce the rules. And they've had to here. And they've knocked down a couple of the big pillars of what makes the NCAA admissions program such a pain in the butt. And it hurts kids. It hurts qualified students who aren't getting into the right schools. And it hurts athletes who aren't picking schools based on what's best for them, but maybe who's paying the most money. And in a lot of cases, like Sylvia D'Souza of Kansas, he had no idea that money was involved. Now, he probably would have gone to Kansas anyway. But there was definitely bribery in play there. So what's the solution? All these tenets here, all these tangents that have gone on. I think the solution is the federal government's going to stick their nose in legislatively. I don't think Congress is going to sit by idly when we have all this conversation of how student debt is crippling America, about how higher education may not be what it was. It's an institution that needs protection, at least in the eyes of government. So I fully expect Congress to step up and try to pass a bill that establishes federal guidelines for student admission. So what does that mean? Well, let's just say something like that gets passed. There'd be some objective criteria that could be regulated and monitored to make sure that students are getting into schools based on fair, and I use fair in air quotes, criteria. There will always be some subjective piece to college admissions, be it diversity in race or ethnicity or experiences, and that's okay. Colleges are a place where diversity is very important. I know when I went to college, I learned a lot more about the world than I knew growing up in a log cabin in the middle of a dirt road. Diversity